Part 1. My name is Leo, and for 6 years I was a night shift nurse on the long-term geriatric ward at St. Bridget's. My job wasn't to save lives. It was to watch them end, to be a witness to the slow, meticulous dismantling of a person. The body forgets how to swallow, the mind forgets how to remember. It's a quiet apocalypse, happening one room at a time, and my role was to change the sheets between cataclysms. The nights were a different world. After the day shift's bustle of guilt-ridden visitors and cheerful feudal therapy, the ward settled into a deep, humming silence. The air grew thick, a sterile soup of antiseptic and something else, something sweet and rotten, like forgotten fruit in a closed drawer. My kingdom was the nurse's station, a fluorescent-lit island in a sea of institutional blue darkness. My only companions were the rhythmic sighs of ventilators and the lonely, persistent beep of a heart monitor that had been beeping for 2 straight years. And the screens. They were ancient security monitors, a bank of 9 black and white TVs with a picture so grainy it looked like it was snowing inside the building. The frame rate was low, making the occasional movement of a patient in their bed a jerky, stop-motion pantomime of restlessness. I'd watch them for hours. It was a form of meditation, tracing the vague, lumpen shapes under thin blankets, ensuring no one was tangled in their rails, no one was silently choking. It was mundane. It was my entire world. I don't know when I first saw it. Your brain edits out the impossible. For weeks, maybe months, my eyes must have slid right over it, filing it under bad cable or light flare from the exit sign. It looked like heat haze, the kind that shimmers above a highway in July, a patch of air on the screen that seemed to vibrate, to buzz, silently warping the image behind it. It only appeared on the monitors, never in the room, and it only ever appeared in one place, hovering directly over a patient's bed. The first time I truly saw it was with Mr. Henderson in 308. A retired postman, his mind lost to a thick fog years ago, but his heart kept ticking with a stubborn, mechanical loyalty. On the screen, a column of silent static, vaguely man-shaped, hung in the air above his sleeping form. It had no features, just an intense, localized distortion, making the grainy image of his blanket and his thin body beneath it seem to melt and swirl. I sighed, chalked it up to a dying camera. A short in the wiring. The mundane explanation was a comfort. I got up, my joints cracking in the silence, and walked the 37 steps to his room. The hallway was a tunnel of shadow, my squeaking shoes the only sound. I pushed his door open. The room was cool, still. The orange LED from his IV pump painted a tiny island of light on the floor. The air was clear. Mr. Henderson breathed his shallow, rattling breath. Nothing was there. I adjusted his blanket, a pointless gesture, and walked back. On the monitor, the shimmer was gone. 3 hours later, as my shift ended, Mr. Henderson's heart monitor flatlined. Not with a shriek, but with a long, resigned tone. The day shift would handle it. I went home, slept, and forgot. Coincidence is the bedrock of sanity. A week later, room 312. Mrs. Gable, who had buried 3 children and now spoke only to people who weren't there. The shimmer was back. That same silent vibration in the air on the screen, hanging over her like a poisonous cloud. This time, I went straight there. The walk felt longer. The silence felt heavier. I stood in her doorway. The room was empty. Still. Her breath was a dry leaf scraping on pavement. I felt the fine hairs on my forearms rise. A chill with no source. I retreated. The shimmer on the monitor vanished the moment I re-entered the nurse's station. She was gone by morning. The phone calls started then. The families. I was often the one to answer in the quiet hours. They were always grief-stricken, of course. But there was a new note. Confusion. A specific, haunting kind of confusion. She was looking right at me, a daughter sobbed to me at 4 a.m. But she didn't see me. She asked who I was. She said my face was all smeared, like a wet painting. My blood went cold. I gave her the script. It's a common neurological symptom in the final stages. The brain's visual processing centers can become, but the words tasted like ash. Another call, a son, voice ragged with jet lag and loss. He kept squinting. He said, "Your voice is my boy's, but where is your face?" He was terrified. Where is your face? The pattern was a lock clicking into place, the shimmer on the screen, the empty room, the death, and then the call. Always the same terrible refrain. They couldn't see the ones they loved. In their final moments, the most important faces in their lives dissolved into meaningless blurs. My carefully constructed wall of cynicism began to crack. This wasn't the body failing. This was something else. Something was there. It was feeding on something in the moment of passing. Not the life that was already leaving, but on the connection, the recognition. It was stealing the last, precious glimpse of love a dying person would ever have. I tried to mention it once to Elaine, a nurse who'd been there for 20 years. I talked about camera glitches and strange family reports. She just looked at me with a bottomless professional pity. "This place gets in your head, Leo," she said, her hand warm and heavy on my shoulder. "You're seeing things in the snow. Get some sleep." So I stopped talking. I started watching. I became an expert in the grain of those awful screens. I learned the difference between a dust mote floating past the lens and the shimmer. The shimmer had a presence, a hungry, patient pulse. I began to call it the scavenger in the quiet of my mind. It felt accurate. It wasn't a reaper. It was a vulture, picking at the emotional wreckage left behind. My world shrank to the glow of those 9 screens. The dread was a constant, low hum in my veins like the fluorescence above me. I was a watchman on the wall of a fortress no one else believed was under siege. I charted meds. I changed soiled linens. I held the hands of the dying, all while a part of me was forever fixed on that bank of static-filled windows, waiting for the next distortion to appear, waiting for the scavenger to choose its next meal. And then my grandmother fell. Part 2. My grandmother, Eleanor, was my bedrock. She smelled of cinnamon and library paste, and her hands, though gnarled with arthritis, could mend anything from a torn shirt to a broken heart. A simple fall in her kitchen, a broken hip, a sentence passed by gravity. After surgery, complications set in. Pneumonia, delirium. A transfer was ordered. To St. Brigid's, to my ward. The world, already tilted on its axis, snapped clean off its foundation. The place I had observed with detached clinical horror was now a hunting ground, and the scavenger's next target was the only person I had ever truly loved. I pulled every string, called in every favor. I lived at the hospital. My colleagues saw a devoted grandson sacrificing sleep, taking double shifts. They didn't see the sentinel, the guard dog wired on fear and cold coffee. My life became a terrible ritual. I'd perform my duties with mechanical efficiency, my smile a stiff, unconvincing mask. Then I'd retreat to my station, my throne of dread, and my eyes would lock onto a single screen. Room 317, her room. Every flicker was a heart attack. Every shift in shadow, a potential manifestation. I saw the scavenger in the steam from the instant coffee machine, in the wavering reflection on the polished linoleum. I was unraveling, a spool of thread bouncing down a staircase. Sleep was a forgotten country. My hands developed a permanent, fine tremor. The time I wasn't chained to the monitors I spent in her room. I'd hold her hand, her skin like rice paper over delicate bird bones. Sometimes through the fog of painkillers and infection she'd surface. Her eyes, clouded and milky, would search the room and find mine. "Leo," she'd whisper, a dry leaf of a sound, a faint, real smile. "There you are." Those moments were a lifeline and a torture. There you are. She saw me. The scavenger hadn't taken that yet. But the fear was a cold stone in my gut. It was coming. I could feel it in the unnatural chill that sometimes lingered in her room, in the way the monitor feed would occasionally distort for no reason, a brief, silent scream of static. I couldn't just watch. I needed a weapon. The scavenger existed in the interstitial spaces, in the low-light capture of the cameras, in the blur between frames. It was a creature of shadow and poor resolution. So, light, violent, overwhelming, disorienting light. I bought a tactical flashlight online. The description promised blinding, seizure-inducing strobe functionality. It felt absurd, purchasing a tool designed for police raids to fight a ghost. When it arrived, it was heavier than I expected, a cold, solid cylinder of aluminum. I kept it in the deep pocket of my scrubs. Its weight was a constant, grim reassurance. For 2 weeks, a tense, excruciating stalemate held. Grandma Eleanor's condition plateaued, then began its slow, inexorable decline. The vigil was eroding me. I'd doze at the desk and jerk awake, gasping, convinced I'd missed the shimmer, that I'd failed. The flashlight felt like a relic from a delusion. Then on a Tuesday at 3:17 a.m., the stalemate broke. I was staring at her screen, my vision swimming with exhaustion. At first I thought it was my eyes, a trick of the tired mind. But no, the air above her bed began to ripple. Not a flicker, a ripple, like heat rising, but coalescing, gaining purpose and shape. The familiar gut-churning shimmer resolved out of nothingness. It was larger than I'd ever seen, more dense. It pulsed with a silent, malevolent energy, warping the video image of my grandmother's sleeping form into a grotesque funhouse mirror reflection. A soundless cry caught in my throat. My body went rigid. On the screen, the scavenger hovered, a vibrating scar on reality. It was here, now. Adrenaline burned through the paralysis. I was out of the chair, my hips smashing against the desk. The flashlight was already in my hand, my thumb finding the ridged strobe switch. I ran. The hallway elongated, a dark tunnel with a single, terrible door at the end. My breaths were ragged saw blows in the silence. I didn't knock. I hit the door with my shoulder and burst into the room. It was dark, just the faint orange glow of the IV pump. The air was still and cold, far colder than the hallway. My grandmother stirred, murmuring in her sleep, and I felt it. A pressure, a dense static-filled emptiness in the space above her bed, a vacuum of warmth and meaning. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there, inches from her face, drinking in the last echoes of her consciousness. "Who?" she mumbled, beginning to wake. No time for fear. I raised the flashlight, aimed at the crushing emptiness, and pressed the switch. The world exploded. The strobe function wasn't a steady beam. It was a frantic, pulsating barrage of light and dark. Flash, strobe, flash, strobe. The effect on the scavenger was instantaneous and catastrophic. It didn't just retreat. The rapid-fire assault of photons seemed to trap it, to define it. In the jagged, staccato bursts of illumination, the invisible became violently, horribly visible. For one fractured, eternal second, I saw it. It was a tapestry of faces. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. A swirling, three-dimensional mosaic of human features, all stretched and merged into a single, writhing humanoid shape. They were pale, translucent, their mouths open in silent, collective agony. Their eyes were wide with a terror that was not of death, but of profound, absolute unknowing. And I recognized them. The mailman, Mr. Henderson. Mrs. Gable, the stroke victim from 304. The pneumonia case from last winter. Every patient who had died confused, who had stared at a loved one and seen a stranger. Their final, stolen moments of fear and isolation were the bricks and mortar of this thing. The creature, this conglomerate of stolen farewells, convulsed. It thrashed in the strobing light as if being electrocuted. A soundless scream seemed to vibrate the very air, a frequency that made my teeth ache. With a final, violent implosion, it unraveled. It didn't flee. It dissipated like smoke in a gale, the faces dissolving into motes of static that faded into nothing. Darkness rushed back in, thicker and more profound than before. The flashlight fell from my numb fingers, clattering on the floor, its beam pointing uselessly at the wall. The only sound was my own wrecked breathing and the soft, rhythmic beep of my grandmother's heart monitor. Her voice, weak but clear, utterly, perfectly clear. No confusion, no fog. I stumbled to her bedside, my legs buckling. I grabbed her hand. "I'm here, Grandma. I'm right here." She turned her head. In the dim orange light, her eyes found mine. They were focused, present. She saw me. Not a blur, not a stranger. Me. A deep, weary love shone in them, alongside a spark of alarm. "What was that light?" she whispered. "What's happening?" I broke. I laid my head on the edge of her mattress and sobbed, great, heaving gasps of terror and relief. I had done it. I had beaten it back. But as my tears slowed, a new, more insidious horror dawned. The scavenger wasn't just a passive observer. It had felt the light. It had reacted. I had attacked it. And in that moment of defense, I had seen its true face, a face made of every soul it had ever claimed from my ward. I hadn't just witnessed the horror anymore. I had declared war on it. And as I sat there, holding my grandmother's hand in the suddenly fragile dark, a terrible certainty took root. It knew me now, too. The watchman was no longer just watching. He was a threat. And the scavenger, this patient, hungry thing made of forgotten faces, would remember. Part 3. I quit St. Brigid's the next morning. My resignation was a single, terse sentence on a sticky note left on the nursing supervisor's keyboard. I didn't collect my final check. I just took my grandmother and fled. The hospital wasn't a workplace anymore. It was a crime scene, and I was the only witness who knew the true nature of the perpetrator. My small, cramped apartment became our fortress. I moved my bed into the living room, placing her hospital bed where my sofa used to be. Every lamp blazed day and night. I replaced all the bulbs with the highest wattage the fixtures could bear. The place hummed with a constant, feverish glow, casting harsh, unforgiving shadows that had nowhere to hide. The electricity bill would ruin me. I didn't care. But light wasn't enough. I needed the weapon. I bought 3 more tactical flashlights. One by her bed, one on the kitchen counter, one on my pillow. Then I went further. I found a used DJ strobe light online, a black box with a vicious, spinning shutter. I rigged it to a timer on the ceiling above her bed. Every 20 minutes from dusk till dawn, it would erupt, a 5-second burst of silent, epileptic fury that would flood the room with a disorienting barrage of light and dark. The first time it went off, Grandma Eleanor cried out, a sharp, animal sound of terror. "Leo, please, what is that for?" I held her hand, my voice a desperate, broken thing. "It's to keep the bad dreams away, Grandma. I promise. It's just for the bad dreams." She looked at me, her eyes wide with a new, profound fear, not of the dark, but of her grandson's unraveling mind. That hurt worse than anything. But the strobe was non-negotiable. It was the only thing I'd seen hurt the scavenger. Sleep became a theoretical concept. I'd doze in a hard-backed chair beside her, my hand on a flashlight, alarms on my phone set to vibrate against my chest every 30 minutes. My dreams, when they came, were not dreams. They were replays. The swirling vortex of faces, silent screams etched into translucent skin, all turning towards me in the strobing abyss. I'd wake gasping, my heart a frantic bird in a cage of ribs, and immediately scan the room, the flashlight beam cutting through the sterile brightness. I was a ghost haunting my own life. My reflection in the microwave door was a stranger. Hollow eyes, skin the color of old paper, a tremor in the jaw that never ceased. I existed on coffee, terror, and the single, fragile thread of her recognition. Every time she woke and said, "There's my boy," it was a victory, a tiny, defiant spark against the consuming dark. For 3 weeks, our grim routine held. The apartment was a blister of light in the sleeping city. Then the signs began. It started with the lights. A lamp in the hallway would flicker, just once, around 3 a.m. The digital clock on the microwave would glitch, the numbers scrambling into meaningless symbols before resetting. Then, the electronics. The static on the old radio, turned off but still plugged in, would swell into a whispering rush that sounded like distant overlapping voices. My phone, charging on the counter, would light up with a screen full of visual snow. The scavenger wasn't in the hospital anymore. It was here. It was adapting, learning the frequencies of my fortress. The light was an obstacle, not a barrier. It was testing the walls. The dread curdled into a cold, certain horror. It wasn't just waiting for her to die anymore. It was waiting for me to break, for the lights to finally go out. The climax came on a night of torrential rain. The storm knocked out power for 6 blocks. Our apartment plunged into a blackness so total it felt solid. The silence after the constant electric hum was deafening. My own scream woke me. I fumbled for the flashlight on my pillow. My thumb slammed the button. Nothing. The batteries, drained from constant vigilance, were dead. The others across the room in the kitchen were useless in the absolute dark. I was blind. "Leo?" Her voice was thin, high with panic. "Leo, the lights!" I know, it's just the storm," I chanted, my voice shaking. I stumbled towards where I kept the spare batteries, tripping over an extension cord, crashing into a side table. The sound of shattering glass was obscenely loud, a flash of lightning. In that split second of blue-white illumination, I saw it. It was in the room. Not on a screen, not as a shimmer. It was there, a denser patch of darkness standing at the foot of her bed. Tall, man-shaped, but composed of a blackness that drank the lightning itself. And within that form I could see them, the faces, faintly glowing now with a sick phosphorescent light. Hundreds of pale, mournful ovals, their features slack with an eternal confused sorrow. They were turned towards my grandmother. The light vanished, leaving the retinal burn seared onto my vision. The after-image of those faces floated in the dark. "Who's there?" my grandmother whimpered. "I can't see. Leo, I can't see anything." The scavenger was using the dark. It was making its move. It would touch her, and her last sight would be that vortex of stolen souls, and my face, her Leo, would be erased forever. No, no, no. A raw, animal sound tore from my throat. Not a scream of fear, but of rage, pure, undiluted fury. It wasn't going to take her, not while I breathed. I abandoned the search for batteries. My hands, moving on instinct, found the DJ strobe light where it was mounted on the ceiling. I ripped the power cord from the wall. It had a backup battery, a tiny 1-hour emergency cell for portability. I prayed it was charged. I clutched the heavy black box to my chest, my fingers finding the manual trigger. I couldn't see the scavenger, but I could feel it, a freezing pressure moving towards her bedside, a wave of absolute nullity. "Look at me!" I roared into the darkness. I pointed the strobe in the direction of the cold and slammed the trigger. The room erupted into a silent, frantic hell of light and dark. Flash strobe, flash strobe. This wasn't like the hospital. This was closer, more violent. The strobe wasn't disorienting it. It was excavating it. In the jagged bursts, I saw the scavenger fully realized. It was a column of anguish. The faces weren't just on its surface. They were it, layer upon layer, an archaeological dig of stolen goodbyes. And as the light hammered it, they didn't just scream. They reacted. Mr. Henderson's face seemed to focus for a fleeting strobe flash on my grandmother. Mrs. Gable's mouth formed a word that might have been sorry. The creature didn't just thrash. It unraveled. Faces began to peel away from the central mass, dissolving into motes of light that winked out like dying stars. It was coming apart under the assault. But it wasn't retreating. In a final, desperate act, it lunged, not for her, but for me. A tendril of concentrated darkness, studded with screaming visages, shot from its core. It wasn't a physical touch. It was an injection of pure psychic cold. It hit me in the chest. The world vanished. Not into darkness, but into a blur. I was standing in my living room, but I couldn't see it. The strobe light was a distant, muffled flicker. My grandmother's bed was a smudge of gray, and she was a formless, wavering shape. The details of her silver hair, the pattern on her blanket, the worried line of her mouth, were gone, smeared away like a watercolor painting left in the rain. The scavenger's final weapon. It wasn't just stealing sight from the dying, it could impose its curse. It was trying to blind me, to make me see the world as its victims did in their final moments, a meaningless, heartbreaking blur. "Grandma?" My voice sounded distant. The shape on the bed shifted. "Leo, your voice... Where are you?" Her own voice was filled with terror. She couldn't see me either. The creature's influence was spreading, a stain on reality. Despair, colder than the entity's touch, flooded me. This was it. We would die in the same room, alone together, strangers to each other's sight. Then, through the blur, I saw it. A single sharp point of clarity. Not with my eyes, but in my mind. The flashlight. The dead one on my pillow. My grandmother had bought it for me years ago, when I first started night shifts. "So you'll always find your way," she'd said. Memory, connection, recognition. That's what it fed on. That's what it stole. But it was also the one thing it couldn't completely erase if the bond was strong enough. I didn't try to see her. I closed my blurry eyes. I thought of her hands, kneading dough. I thought of her voice, reading me stories. I thought of the specific, stubborn love in her eyes when she looked at me. I focused on the knowing, not the seeing. My hand, trembling, found the strobe light's trigger. I didn't aim it at the creature. I turned it towards myself, pointing the brutal, stuttering flashes directly into my own face. "Look at me, Grandma!" I screamed, not with my eyes, but with every memory, every ounce of love I had. "It's Leo. I'm here!" Flash. The light burned through the blur in my vision. Strobe. I saw my own living room floor, sharp for a millisecond. Flash. The edge of her bed. Strobe. And then her face. Clearing, like a lens snapping into focus. In the strobing hell light, her eyes were wide, locked onto mine. Not with confusion, with a fierce, desperate recognition. She was fighting it too, using the anchor of a lifetime of love to claw her way back from the blur. "I see you," she cried, her voice strong, clear, a gale cutting through static. Our gazes met, held, in the chaotic, pounding light, a perfect shared moment of knowing. It was the antithesis of the scavenger. It was a supernova of connection in its world of stolen farewells. The creature behind me let out a silent shriek that vibrated in the marrow of my bones. The cold pressure shattered. The blur evaporated from my sight completely. I whirled, the strobe still blazing. The scavenger was collapsing in on itself, the faces within it wearing expressions not of agony, but of something like release. One by one, they softened, faded and winked out into a gentle final darkness. The central mass of static imploded with a sound like a sigh, leaving behind only the smell of ozone and a fleeting, profound silence. The strobe light's backup battery died. The room was plunged back into the storm dark. But the ordinary dark felt different now. Empty. Clean. A moment later, the power came back on with a surge. Every lamp in the apartment blazed to life, restoring our fortress of light. I crawled to her bedside. She was crying, but she was smiling too. Her hand found my cheek. Her touch was warm, real. Her eyes, clear and deep, held mine. "My boy," she whispered. "You're here." She saw me. I saw her. The connection was unbroken. We stayed like that for a long time. The siege was over. The scavenger was gone, unmade by the very thing it sought to devour. Grandma Eleanor passed away 3 nights later, in her sleep, in the bright, quiet warmth of our living room. I was holding her hand. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful. There was no shimmer, no blur, no stranger in the room. Just me, her grandson. The last thing she knew. I still keep the lights on most of the time. Old habits. The flashlights are in a drawer. I sleep through the night now, and my dreams are my own. But sometimes, in the dead quiet just before dawn, I'll catch a flicker from the corner of my eye, a lamp dimming for a half second, the TV screen flashing with static. I'll freeze, my heart seizing. Then I'll feel it. Not dread, but a quiet, steady certainty. I'll look at the photograph of us on the side table, our faces clear, our connection etched in silver and paper. And I'll remember, some things are too strong to be stolen. Some lights, once ignited, never truly go out. The scavenger fed on the moment, a loved one becomes a stranger. But we looked at each other, in the heart of the blur, and we remembered, we knew. And in the end, that knowing was the only weapon we ever really needed.